Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to class today. With these live streams for Web 287 and our ePortfolio class here, they're a little bit different typically than what you might experience in a regular class, Because what I like to do with some of them every now and again is I just like to have a little chat with you all. And I think that's what I want to do today. Just want to have a talk. And I want to have a talk about kind of a serious, I guess, subject. Because it's one of those things where, it's something that you're going to have to approach at some point in your life. This idea that there will come a time when you have to move on from one job to another job. Probably so. We want to settle down in a career, and even when we settle down in a career, it may not necessarily mean that one career at that one place is the only job you have. Maybe you move in a career from some kind of junior analyst to a senior analyst to a manager to whatever. You're moving up that ladder. So when we think about being in one place for a long period of time, it's not the exact same as having one job for a long period of time. And so there'll come a point at some point in your life where you're going to have to make the decision to try to move on to the next thing, whether that is a different job in a different place or a bigger role in the organization that you're currently at. And so what I'd like to talk to you all about today is this idea of when do we know that it's time to sort of move on to that next thing. This is something that can be kind of difficult, right? Like, this is something that can be a difficult subject for us to approach. Because in general, people don't like change. By and large, the human beings that you encounter in day-to-day life, they hate change. And that's understandable, like we kind of get into a routine. We kind of get into a life, and anything that is change seems like it is, a foundation rocking situation that's going to change our lives. But then oftentimes we discover that, it was just another fork in the road to a new destination as we just kind of go along. And so I've titled what I want to talk about today. I've titled it The Cups You Have, and we'll kind of get more into this analogy in just a little bit. There are a lot of things that have cup analogies, and I don't think I've shared it with you all yet. Maybe I have. Don't quite remember, Another analogy that I have talked about with a cup in relation to jobs and how we approach them. And this is kind of similar, but it's still kind of different, right? Because we are still kind of looking at this idea of filling up our cups, and what does it mean to fill up our cups? And so when we approach a job situation, essentially what we're doing when we approach that job situation is we're approaching it with a new cup. Day one, we walk into a job and we have this cup, and on day one, it's empty. On day one, it's empty, but as we progress and as we go through and as we learn and do more things, as we increase our experience, our cup starts to fill up. But you see, here's the problem with jobs kind of as they are. You know, if you're staying in one position for an extended period of time, once your cup in that position fills up, there's nowhere for any of the rest of that talent, any of the rest of that knowledge, any of the rest of those skills to go. So it overflows and it goes to other places. Which is to say that in one job, there's only so much that you can experience, there's only so much that you can learn, there's only so much that you can do. And so when we think about it in that sort of way, we can almost chart it. We can almost chart our career trajectory. You know, we can say that, oh, you know, we have our X and our Y axis. Our X axis being our jobs. And our Y axis being what we can learn and how we can grow. And this is where I kind of take a little bit of a sidebar here. And acknowledge something. Right? Because you might be watching this and you might be sitting there thinking, well, Mr. Ramsey, you told us that, you know, in our resumes that we shouldn't talk about how we want to learn. And you shouldn't. You know, that's still a thing. Is that you shouldn't talk about wanting to learn from the company or wanting to find a place where you can, you know, get the skills you need. Because they, you know, that's not something that they care about. It doesn't stop it from being something that you care about. You know, when it comes to one of these resume situations, what you're doing is you're, you know, like we've kind of mentioned before, you're a salesman. And the product, instead of, you know, being whatever, you know, object is on the shelf at a store, the product is you. Now, whenever you're selling anything, one of the interesting things to consider is that you're not really selling the thing. Right? Like, think for a minute about like a mattress salesman. Mattress salesman. If a mattress salesman tries to sell a mattress, they're not going to sell very many mattresses. That's why when you see commercials for mattresses, when you see people trying to sell these mattresses, they're not trying to sell the mattress itself. They're trying to sell you the idea of a good night's sleep. Something you want, something you need, something that provides value to you. And then relate it back to the product, then relate it back to the mattress. And so when you're writing your resume, that's what you're doing. You're selling the areas in which you provide value. And wanting to learn out of the company isn't necessarily providing value, but it is something that you should want to do, and it's something that you're going to do by default. Anytime you go into a new situation, you're going to pick up new things, you're going to pick up new ideas, you're going to pick up new skills that you never had before. So learning is almost par for the course. We should expect to learn. instead of asked to learn. And it's when we feel like we're not learning anymore, it's when we feel like we're not growing anymore, when that cup that we had when we started day one at that job starts to overflow to where we're not gaining anything valuable ourselves at that point. That's when it's time to move on to the next thing. Because there are limiters with how jobs work. There are limiters. Right? So if at my first job, maybe I'm a, some kind of junior level security analyst, I'm given a certain set of skills, I'm given a certain set of tasks, I'm given a certain set of responsibilities. And these tasks and responsibilities that I'm given cap out what I can learn. Caps it out. There's only so much you can put in that cup. Based on the skills, based on the responsibilities, based on the tasks, the job requirements for that job. There's only so much you can put in that cup. And so it's when you feel like you've exhausted that cup, when you feel like it's not filling anymore, when you feel like you're losing some things that you should be gaining because that cup is too full. Well, that's when it's time to move on to the next role. A higher role, a better role, a more important role. So that's where job 2 comes in, but even then it's limited based on the responsibilities, based on the tasks, based on the things that you know and you do. Right? But what happens here is that when you come into this job, you've already got a full cup. You've already got a full cup. That covers that area. But I have all of this other area that I can fit into a new cup. Maybe a bigger cup. Because once you learn something, once you've done something, once it becomes a part of your experience, it doesn't go away. Right? Like you might need a refresher on it in the future so you can remember it a little better, but it doesn't go away. You have that cup and everything in it. You have the knowledge that you gained, you have the skills that you gained, you have the combination of everything that you know and everything that you've done, your personal experience. But now we have this new role, this new job. And for this new role, we need a new cup. And we start to fill that cup. And when that cup starts to overfill, well, it's on to the next one. And the next one. And the next one. And you may not believe it. It might sound strange to you. But the average person has around 12 jobs in their lifetime as a worker. And we put that in perspective for about 32 years. The average person has about 12 jobs, which sounds like a lot. And it sounded like a lot to me until I took a few minutes and I reflected back on my career and things that I've done throughout my, working life. And I was like, well, I did that, and then I did that, and that, and then that. And now this, and that's 5. And that's 5. And here I am only, I'd say probably 14 years within a working adult life. So when you put it in perspective that way and you reflect on it, you're like, wow, I have taken on a lot of different roles and a lot of different jobs. And as you reflect on it, you think, well, I have learned from each of these jobs. And there are things that I've accommodated to my personal experience, even from jobs I had early on, that were in completely different areas of what I do now. I've accommodated how I filled my cup there to be able to do what I do now. And, we talk about that a lot. When we say, like, well, you've got these jobs, they might not be in relevant fields. But you need to figure out what you've learned in those relevant fields, how in those irrelevant, quote unquote, fields, how what you've learned there filled your cup and can help you in the next thing. Because it can. Skills like, customer service, communication, empathy. That was a tough one. That was something that I learned a lot when I was working in some initial jobs, was empathy. And these are all skills. These are all soft skills that you can carry forward into the next thing, into the next thing, into the next thing. And so we keep that baseline and we accommodate it, and we just, from each place we build on it and start a new cup. So our cups kind of grow with us. As we move along and as we grow and we learn new things and we're accommodating new roles and new knowledge to our personal experience, our cups grow with us. And we can take what we have from our old cup and we can transfer it into our new cup. And keep going. Take those old skills, transfer them into a new role where you can accommodate them in there. And even some of those old skills turn into new skills, because you're doing them in a new format, in a new way. So you take that old cup, you take that smaller cup, you dump it into the next one. And that next one's a little bit bigger. And then the next one's bigger still, and even bigger all the way up. But at each job, what you can put in that cup, it's finite. There's an end to it. And you have to be willing to say, when, especially, which is going to be especially difficult because we hate change. You have to be willing to say, I think it's time for a new cup. And that might be a position you're in right now. Maybe you're in a job that's really comfortable. something that you've worked in for a while, something that you think's pretty easy. One of the things about an easy job is that, it's nice to kind of just go and collect a paycheck. But when something's easy, especially when you admit that it's easy, then you know it's not challenging you. You might not be willing to admit it, but that cup is full. You've got all the knowledge, you've got all the skills, you've got all the abilities that you need to perform that work, to perform those roles, to perform those responsibilities. That's why they're easy. Your cup's full. You already have all that experience. You've got it to where it can go. And the thing about easy stuff is that you can't grow in an easy situation. Without challenge, without struggle even, there is no growth. So you might think, well, if I go to that new job, if I go to that next thing, it's going to be hard. It's going to be difficult. I'm going to have to try to do new stuff to try to fill up my cup, and those things that I'm going to have to do, it's going to be hard. I'm scared of it. Fear is a part of life. Change is a part of life. Fear makes us risk averse. But especially when we're talking about careers. If you're not willing to step out, if you're not willing to take a risk, you're not willing to grow. You're not willing to learn. You're not willing to change. And that's one of the things that I try to do with these job application assignments. Whether you get a call back or not to talk to somebody, I hope that you do. And, again, if you get any kind of response, whether positive or negative, please reach out to me. Let me know. Tell me who contacted you back. Tell me what they said. Especially if it's positive. I want to, I'd like to share in your successes with you. But it's kind of why I do that whole assignment, is that it forces you out of your comfort zone a little bit. Because that's what happens, right? We get a nice full cup and we get comfortable. But you can't eat if you're not hungry. So as you go throughout the remainder of the semester, as you're approaching your job application assignments, and even beyond the semester, as you're approaching applying for jobs and moving from job to job, I want you to think about that. I want you to think about it hard. Think about where you're comfortable. And think about how you need to push yourself out of it. Think about your cup. Think about the level where it's at. Is there room left? Or is it full? If it's full, are you ready to do what you need to do for that new cup? And sometimes you have to, you take this step out. You take this step out in spite of fear. Because change is scary. It takes everything we know, it takes everything we do, and turns it on its ear, but it's only temporary. Change is temporary. Because if you can think back on your life and everything that's ever changed throughout your life, everything that's ever changed, where one time it was change and new and different, at some point it became normal. How full is your cup? What are the cups that you have? That's all that I have for you for today. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. I hope you're able to get something valuable out of this. I hope maybe I can push you in a good direction. If you have any questions for me, if you're here with me watching live, you can, I'm going to hang out in the chat for a couple minutes. Turn the music back on and just hang out in the chat for a couple minutes. So if you're here watching live, you can ask me a question here. If you're watching this later and you have some questions, feel free to send me an email. Message me on Teams. Do whatever you need to do to get in touch with me. I'd be glad to help you out however I can. Job application assignment due this coming weekend. Can't quite remember off the top of my head how long we've got for this module. I think it might be another 3-week module. I'll have a weekend reminder announcement coming out tomorrow anyway. But there's definitely a job application assignment that's due on Sunday. So reflect on this as you're filling out that new application. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.